Welcome to the Arts and Oddities podcast with A.M. Hall, starring A.M. Hall. Now, here is A.M. Hall.
Welcome to Art and Oddities with A.M. Hall, where I talk about anything that strikes my fancy, to include all kinds of creative works, from children's cartoons to underground zines to identity politics and everything in between. My guests and I will discuss how art impacts and reflects culture and counterculture, enables individualism and conformity, and have loads of fun along the way. I am your host, A.M. Hall, aka Anthony Bonafini, aka Galena Storm, aka Aquaces Mancuso. Today, I'll tell you all about the last day of filming for the trial of Hephaestus, and then Reverend Craig Schwalenberg tells me all about how he uses multi-million-dollar satellites to look for Tupperware in the woods. Stay tuned. I recently wrapped up filming for the trial of Hephaestus. The last scene was filmed just a week ago. It was the end credits sequence where I, playing the character of the satyr, sing a song that Panic Bedlam wrote based on the fragments of Sappho. It's called the Sapphic Blues. And I think it's a really fun song. A lot of Sappho's fragments fit perfectly into the blues riff, without any alterations at all. And it's amazing. But most of the lines had to be tweaked to fit, and I think Panic did a great job capturing the spirit of the poems. And so we went out into the woods to the edge of a cliff, and I played the song on the ukulele and I danced around. Of course, even though I like to play on the ukulele, I'm pretty terrible at it still. So, though in the film it'll look like I'm playing the uke, I'm really just a faking figure who fakes it. It really is me singing though, so there's that at least. This is a bit of a short intro today, only because the interview is so much longer than usual. Reverend Craig Schwalenberg can be quite chatty, but everything he has to say is interesting. Please stay tuned to hear him out. I am joined here today by the Reverend Craig Schwalenberg. How are you doing today, Craig?
Recovering from a cold, so I apologize for if my voice sounds a little scratchy.
Your voice does sound a little scratchy, but my listeners probably won't know the difference.
True.
So, your main hobby is geocaching, isn't it?
It is one of my hobbies.
One of your...
I would say my main hobby is playing games, but geocaching happens to be an outdoor game that I play.
An outdoor game. Can you tell my listeners a little bit what geocaching is?
Geocaching is a worldwide cooperative treasure hunt using GPS-enabled devices, global positioning devices. So people hide containers all over the world, and then they post the coordinates on a geocaching website, which is geocaching.com, and they usually leave a description of the container, and then people with GPS devices try to find those containers. The containers can be as small as the tip of your finger and as big as, well, there's really no limit on the size. I found one that was the size of an SUV once.
Did you really?
Yeah, well, it was an SUV, so it was that size. And then if it is a container, you would expect it to contain something. Bare minimum, they're supposed to contain a piece of paper to sign in that you found it. You sign it physically, and then you also log it in online. But if it's a big enough container, it might contain other stuff. The other stuff is usually not super treasure. If you're thinking about getting rich through geocaching, that's not the point. Think more along the lines of Happy Meal toys, and you'll be less disappointed. But if you find something in a cache that you like, you can take it, but you have to leave something as good as or better than what you found. That's one of the rules.
Okay.
So, like I said, it's a worldwide treasure hunt, cooperative, using GPS devices.
Have you hidden any geocaches, locally or otherwise?
Cheryl and I, Cheryl's my wife, we started geocaching together, and our team name, you're supposed to have a team name or a geocaching name. Our team name is Team Ducky, and we together have hidden, I think, without looking at my stats, I think we've hidden over 30.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, not all of them are active anymore. We were very active in the hobby, 8 years ago. And we probably fell off on our activity of it, our practice of it, about 3 years ago.
Okay.
And in that time, we haven't hidden any new ones, and other ones have been removed or decommissioned.
I see. Okay. So they do get removed and decommissioned occasionally.
Well, the first thing that happens is containers will get old or get broke or something along those lines. The other thing that happens is sometimes a non-geocaching person will find a container, and even though all of ours have, well, most of ours have, a note in them that says this is a geocaching item, here's what it is, if you aren't familiar with it, please put it back where you found it, go to this website to learn more. They get removed by people, and then you have a choice of either replacing the container or decommissioning that particular geocache, retiring it. Yeah,
retirement. Okay.
Yeah, the word for that is called muggling. They stole that from the Harry Potter mythos. People who are not geocachers are considered muggles. A person who takes a container muggled it.
I think that the term muggle has been appropriated by lots and lots of different groups, and anyone who is not a member of the group is considered a muggle.
It's strangely appropriate for geocaching, and here's why. Most people have no idea that geocaching exists. Completely no clue. And yet, when we first moved to Oneonta, there were 20 or 30 geocaches in Oneonta. 5 years later, there were over 200. They're everywhere. I know, just off the top of my head, I know of 4 within walking distance of your house.
My walking distance is pretty large.
My walking distance versus yours. Within your walking distance, I know of, I couldn't count as high within your walking distance. But the point of the matter is, I can navigate through the Oneonta area and give directions to other geocachers based on where geocaches are. You pass by them every day and have no idea they're there. There are people playing this game, and you have no idea they're doing it. So there's this secret world taking place right around you, and that's very much similar to the Harry Potter idea. There's this whole wizarding world that the muggles are completely unaware of, and if you are a geocacher, one of the tenets is you're not supposed to let muggles see you finding a container. Much the same way in Harry's world, if you're a wizard, you're not supposed to let muggles see you cast a spell.
That is really interesting. And I don't think I've ever actually seen someone find a container, even though I've heard you talk about finding them.
And that's because if you saw us find a container, you might go then and muggle the container.
Right.
Or worse, you might call the cops and say there's been some suspicious activity. There's a drug deal going on, or someone placed a bomb somewhere. If you saw me placing an ammo can is a very useful container for geocaching because it's watertight, it's resistant to the elements, big enough storage. If you saw me placing an ammo can under something secretively, but you didn't see what exactly I'd placed, you might reasonably assume I was up to no good. And there have been many occasions of police officers summoning bomb squads to blow up geocaches.
Oh my gosh.
Which is why you are supposed to label all geocaches on the outside with geocache. This is an official geocache owned by this person, blah, blah, blah.
That's incredible.
That's the whole muggle thing. To me, when we first discovered the hobby, we looked up our address on the website, and we were amazed to find out how many of these were hidden that we'd walked by every day. And it completely changes your experience of your environment. All of a sudden, you see things in a whole new way. So yeah, in that respect, the muggle, while there are other people who've used the muggle idea, there's a sense of that wonder and awe and secretive nature that just naturally is a part of the hobby.
And I feel like that's one of the core fundamentals of human psychology or human nature, I think, is this desire to be part of this group that's secret from the larger world around.
Yes. Oh yeah. That is part of the fun of it. Part of the fun of it. Although, conversely, the other part of that is the joy of bringing people into the secret group.
Yes.
I've preached about geocaching. I've talked to people. I've written articles about it. I've hosted geocaching picnics. The idea of introducing kids and families and friends into this hobby. So yes, there's a joy in being a part of this secret group, but there seems to be this joy in bringing others into it.
What are some of the more interesting local geocaches that you've found?
Okay. Local geocaches, interesting ones that I found.
You told me a story a while back about one in a tree.
Which one in the tree? The one with the rope?
There was a one in it was called The Tree Climber, and you had a story about some kids who were with you at the time.
Oh gosh. Yeah, we didn't actually get that one. So who hid that one? I'm trying to remember who hid that one. I think that was hidden by El Fartero. He's a local doctor, and he goes by the geocaching name El Fartero. And he hid a series of caches with a tree climbing theme to them. And geocaches cannot be buried underground. They can be placed in caves, but you can't actually dig a hole and cover them up.
Right.
They're not like buried treasure. And you can't place them by bridges, schools, anything that might be a target of a bomb threat. So federal buildings are usually right out of the question. But after that, all bets are off. And if you want to place one top of a tree, so be it. And so he's placed a bunch in trees. And I was at the church picnic, and I asked the kids if they wanted to go find a geocache with me. And they were like, yay, let's do it. So we went running off. It was in Neowa Park on the whatever that field is on the other side of the highway in Neowa Park. I know it's got a special field name, but I don't remember what it was. Anyway, it led us to, go figure, a tree. And I looked up and I was like, there's no way I'm getting that. I have no way I'm getting that. And one of the boys says, I can get it. I'm like, I really don't think that's a good idea. He's like, no, I can do it. And he started climbing up the tree, and he got about halfway up. And I said, yeah, I think it's time to come down. We're gonna DNF this one. DNF means did not find. And it's not that we didn't find it. We found it. We know where it is, but we can't get to it. And he came back down, and I later heard from his mom, what were you doing? I'm like, I don't have kids. That's a good reason I don't have kids. So I'll tell you it's not a local one, but my favorite geocache that I ever found on the list of favorite geocaches was near Marlborough, Massachusetts, and it was called National Treasure. It was based off of the National Treasure movies. There's a certain type of cache called a night cache. Night caches can only be done at night. So the coordinates you're given will give you to the start of a trail, and then you have to use flashlights or other techniques to find fire tacks, is what they're called, for marking trails. So you have to follow the fire tacks through the woods to find the cache, usually. There are other ways of doing night caches, but the point is, during daylight, you can't find it. You got to go out at night. And there's something cool about being in the woods at night, or in a city at night. It's just a different experience. So I saw this one. I was out there for a conference that Cheryl was attending, and I saw this night cache. The other type of cache is a multi-cache, which is you find one geocache, inside you find the coordinates to the next, and inside you find the coordinates to the next. And, usually 3 or 4 or 5 of them, and then you get to the end and you found the final goal. National Treasure is listed as a 10-part multi-cache at night cache that takes, according to reports, about 3 hours to complete.
So you have to have 3 hours of nighttime
in
order to get this geocache.
Yeah. So I sent out a note to the community. That's the other thing, is geocaches have communities. There's usually a local cachers group. There's a local caching group here in Oneonta. So I contacted the caching group near Marlborough, Massachusetts. I said, hey, I'm in town. I'm going to be here for 2 days. I'd really like to do this night cache, but there's no way I'm going out in the strange woods by myself for 3 hours. Is there anybody who wants to go with me? And there was a guy, cache name was Cash Rat. And so Team Ducky and Cash Rat, who never met. He says, yeah, I'd like to do it too. I've been looking for someone to do it with. I was like, all right, come pick me up at my hotel and we'll go. So this guy shows up, perfect stranger. I've never met him before, but I assume that he's a decent person because he's part of the geocaching community, and that seems to be the way it works. He picked me up, and we drove to this state forest around a lake, and we started on this cache. And every cache was different. There was one that you needed a UV light to find.
Okay.
And I happen to have a UV flashlight in my backpack. I'm famous.
It doesn't tell you that you need these things
No.
ahead of time.
No, this one was not. And Cash Rat was very thankful I was with him because I carry a huge geocaching bag filled with gadgets. people always mock me when they go geocaching because I'm carrying this 10, 15, 20-pound bag. And they're like, what's in there? I'm like, everything I can think of. And they mock me until they find out they need something. And then I reach into my bag of tricks and pull out the tool of the trade that is needed. So one of them required a UV light. One of them was a water cache, which involves you take a PVC pipe and you drill holes in the bottom of the PVC pipe. You attach it with wires to a tree or a pole, and then you drop a little matchstick tube for keeping matches dry. You drop that in the bottom of the tube. The only way to get the tube out, the cache out, is to fill this tube with water so that the matchsticks float up. But there's a hole in the bottom for the water to drain out. So you need somebody to put their fingers on the holes on the bottom, and then you need to fill up the pipe with water. And you hope that you have a water bottle with you. Now in this case, it was a very big pipe. You had to go down to the lake, fill up a water bottle, come back, fill up the tube, go back to the lake, fill up the tube again, and then it would float up. So one of us is sitting there like the little, the Dutch boy with his finger in the dike, and the other one is running through the woods to get this water. So that was one of them. Another one was we'd walked along this peninsula out into the lake following the fire tax. We got to the end of the peninsula and there was nothing there. And I'm like, what did we do? What did we do wrong? Did we miss a sidestep? Did we miss a clue? And then I remembered a friend of mine who had done, another geocacher who had done it, said, when you get to a spot and you're lost, look up. And so I'm like, well, I'm lost. And I looked up, and sure enough, on a thin birch tree, all the way up, like 30 feet up, was a cache attached to the birch tree. The idea behind that one is, you ever heard the poem Bending Birches Low? You had to bend, one person had to bend the birch tree down, the other person opens up the cache to get the next clue, puts it back in. This went on for 10 different caches, each one another bizarre, exciting, unique cache.
This is a cache that could not have been done with only one
Nope,
person.
one person couldn't have done it. Halfway around the lake, as we're pulling up a cache that was in a log, I got stung by a wasp.
Oh, no.
And then I got stung again. Turns out a wasp nest had taken up residence right under where the cache was.
Oh, no.
So there I am. I'm being stung by wasps. I take off my backpack. I take off my headlamp because they're underneath my headlamp. They're underneath my backpack. And I run away from the wasp nest. Cache rat grabs the cache. Because we know what's important here. He gets the information out of the cache. He goes back and puts it back where it belongs. And then he comes in. Meanwhile, I have opened up my bag of tricks. I've pulled out my med kit. And of course, I have med stuff for bug bites. And so I'm applying it. And then he took, at this point, we're halfway around the lake. We've been at this for an hour and a half. We could go back to the car, or we could finish and go back to the car. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I said, well, we got to continue. So he took my cache bag for me and started carrying both bags.
Oh, gosh.
And
so he had his own cache bag.
Oh, yeah. It was smaller than mine, obviously. And we finished. But that one, and this is kind of giving away a secret, that one is not a 10-part multi-cache. It's actually 13. When you find the 10th one and you think you're done, it says, this is just a decoy. The real one is back this way. Follow these clues. And they did that 3 separate times after we found. So they found the 10th. That one said, no, the final is actually here. We went to that one. No, the final's...
Thank you, Mario, but our princess is in another castle.
Exactly so. So, to me, the amount of work that went into that cache, the amount of creativity, the fun, barring the wasp nest, the fun that I had doing it, and it took us 2 hours and 46 minutes to do it. That was a blast. To me, that's one of the highlights of the geocaching time I've had. It's not here in our local area.
That's all right. One of the questions I had prepared was, like, what are some of the issues with geocaching? But I think you've covered that with, like, bomb squads and trespassing and whatnot.
Well, there's a number of them I haven't said. So there are rules to this hobby. The people hiding the caches are participants, and the people finding them are participants. But there are rules, and there's an organization made up of some paid people and a lot of volunteers that try to enforce the rules. One of them is, and probably the most important one is, you can't place a geocache on private property without permission, which also means you can't go looking for a geocache on private property without permission. And Cheryl and I are very much sticklers for this because we don't want the hobby to be ruined.
Right.
We don't want the police to be upset with us. We want to be on good terms with the local police. I've been pulled over 3 times by police while geocaching, and it wasn't a bad thing, but I'm a white middle-class man.
Yeah.
If I were...
That you do have some amount of protection.
I have
for
some
that.
privilege there. But if I were, one of the less privileged classes of our society, and I got pulled over wandering around at night with a flashlight and a strange bag on my back,
in the middle of the woods,
or in a neighborhood,
right?
Worse, put me in a neighborhood.
Yeah.
I got pulled over once because they'd had break-ins, and they thought I was out possibly robbing places. And what I was doing, I was trying to be the first person to find a brand new cache. So the private property is a big one to me, and there are people who take shortcuts. They hide them in places that they think is public. Well, don't think. You can go online and find out who owns the land. It's not hard. So that's another issue, I guess.
Did you hide any on the church property or no?
I have not hidden any on the church property, and it's very frustrating to me. So there is a rule that you cannot hide a cache within 1/10 of a mile of another cache. I'm going to get in trouble. There's a somewhat, let's see, what's the best word to use here? Let's be kind and say a simple, not so impressive cache.
Okay.
Hidden on the property of the YMCA.
Which is right next door to church
2 doors
property.
down from our church. So basically the line, if you drew the 1/10 of a mile line, it goes to just across the street, almost to the carriage house. But that encompasses our church property, our church office property, and until that cache is retired, removed, muggled. Well, if it's muggled, then the owner of the cache can still put up a new one.
Right.
It has to be retired. Until that happens, we can't place one on the church property. And even if we could, I would actually have to go to the board and ask for permission, because it's not my property.
Right.
I don't own it. I work there, but I don't own it. The church owns it.
I forgot to introduce you properly. You are the minister of the local Unitarian Universalist Church.
The Unitarian Universalist Society of Oneonta, New York.
And that is your profession.
That is my vocation, yes. Yes. So, but I think I could convince the church to hide something there, but not until that other cache disappears.
Right.
So, yeah, it's frustrating. There are some great caches hidden on church properties. I've been keeping a list of UU-themed caches when I find them.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can't make a political, commercial, or religious-themed cache. They want this to be a family-friendly, apolitical, non-offensive hobby.
That's fair enough.
Yeah. Now, you can get around that in certain ways, because one of the things they really do want to encourage is educational and historic caches.
Okay.
And a lot of UU churches are usually near historic sites.
Yeah.
So you can talk about the historic nature of that building as long as you are not trying to express your theology, and instead you are giving the history, you're all good.
What do you think of geocaching versus other GPS-related hobbies, such as Pokemon Go?
Well, see, now, that's a funny one, because I'm an avid Pokemon Go player right now.
Are you?
Yeah, I play that one more than I geocache currently. What do I think of them in comparison? They're completely different.
Okay.
They both use GPS-enabled devices.
And it's lovely that most people have them these days.
Yeah, I mean, that was the big revolution in geocaching. Okay, well, the original history with geocaching, GPS devices back in the 80s were specifically set to not work. Well, whatever the size, they were specifically set to not work. They only had an accuracy within 1/4 of a mile.
Okay.
Unless you were a military person, and then yours were very accurate. But because they didn't want people using GPS devices to target places, the satellites fuzzed the data on purpose. Clinton reversed that. There were so many people clamoring for commercial uses of GPS devices that finally they said, okay, this makes more sense as a commercial thing than as a military thing. So on one day, they flipped the switch. That's all they had to do, is flip the switch, and all the satellites stopped fuzzing the data and dropped it from 1/4 of a mile down to 50 feet. And this came out, and the science geeks were like, really? It's accurate? How accurate is it? So one guy out in Seattle grabbed a big bucket, 5-gallon bucket, and he threw a can of beans and a DVD and some other stuff, and he put it in the bucket, and he hiked out into the woods, and he took the GPS coordinates, and then he posted them online and said, if you're interested, see if you can find it. Let's test how accurate it is. And a bunch of people went and did it and had a grand time finding it. And so other people started doing the same thing around the country, and that's how geocaching was born.
Now that's really interesting.
Yeah, that's the history. So you have this, that's the first start of it. The revolution came when smartphones got GPS devices. Up until that time, you had to be a real geek with a GPS receiver to participate in this hobby. You want to talk about it being a secret club. It was a very secret club. Then the smartphones came out, and now you have a geocaching app on your phone,
Which anyone with a smartphone...
when anyone with a smartphone can play, and the ranks of geocachers multiplied by 10. And then you had the people who were in the hobby before, who used to practice it with their GPS, grouching about how the hobby has now been ruined by this influx of all these people. But at the same time, the number of geocaches hidden and the number of events and the number of gatherings just went through the roof.
Careful now, that's hipster talk.
Exactly. So I'm always a little bit leery of saying a geocacher should not be saying that Pokemon Go isn't a real game, not like geocaching. They're different. They're a different thing entirely. I like Pokemon Go because I can play that almost anywhere. And it doesn't require a lot of effort on my part.
You don't have to carry this 20-pound
I don't have to carry
bag.
the geocaching bag, but I do like geocaching when I'm traveling, because at almost every rest stop, at almost every town, there's going to be a geocache hidden by somebody, and it's going to take me somewhere that somebody found interesting. When we moved here to Oneonta, that's when we started geocaching, and I know where the bird sanctuary is. Do you know where the bird sanctuary is?
I have only visited in winter, unfortunately.
Yeah, but most people here don't. We found it in our first month because of geocaching. I know where the tallest waterfall in New York State is because there's a geocache there. I know where one of the best restaurants in a particular town is because someone hit a geocache there and said so. They didn't want to make it commercial, but they said it was my favorite place. Geocaches, when you're traveling, give you a new perspective on the place when you're traveling and visiting to, that Pokemon Go doesn't quite do.
It is pretty... There are Pokemon that can only be found in certain places or at certain
Yes.
times of day.
Yes, but you're not in control. Nobody's in control of where the Pokemon are, and only Niantic is in control of where the Pokestops and the Pokegyms are. Whereas with geocaching, Groundspeak, that's the company that runs geocaching.com, Groundspeak doesn't hide the caches. We hide the caches. They approve them. They make sure that they're not hidden in bad places or dangerous places. But we, the people playing this game, decide what's hidden and where and why. So there's it's just different. I wouldn't say one is better than the other.
Do you have anything to share with my listeners as we wrap up?
I would say that there are a couple of fun, jokey phrases that people say. I have one t-shirt that says, "I use multi-million-dollar satellites to find Tupperware in the woods. What's your hobby?"
Okay.
I have another one that says, "Geocachers know the best places to hide the bodies."
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh.
that's not a particularly nice one. And then the other one, my favorite one, says, "Geocaching is what happens when nerds go outside," because it's very scientific based. The other part, though, is I would tell you, not only did we learn the area better because of geocaching, we made friends. As a minister, it's strongly discouraged that you make friends with the people you're serving in your church.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to make friends in a new town if that's your main community. But geocaching links you up with these people who share this hobby. They gather. There are events that take place every month or two here in Oneonta that the geocachers are invited to come to. We had one of the geocachers struggle with cancer, and the local caching community came together and helped support him. It's a good set of people, much like the story about the cache in Marlborough.
Yeah.
The fact that I can travel somewhere and I can put out a call, "Hey, does anybody want to help me out?" I've always gotten a good response when I've asked geocachers for aid. So it's a good way to meet decent people.
Well, that's quite nice. But this is a hobby that you would definitely encourage people to take up.
Oh, I really encourage people to take it. It's a good way to get exercise, good way to know your local area. It's a good way to meet new people. There's other aspects to it we haven't even talked about.
Maybe I'll have you back again sometime.
Yeah, the travel bugs, the travel coins, there's all kinds of things. And the biggest geocaching gathering is taking place next year in Ohio. It's not too far away from us. So there's all kinds of aspects to this game. If you want it to be something that you do as an individual on your own, you can do that. If you want it to be about collecting, you can do that. If you want it to be about a competition, you can do that. If you want it to be about socializing, you can do that. you're completely in control of what you do with this hobby, but there are so many different facets to it to explore. And I've met some of my best friends through it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining me today. Maybe I'll have you back again sometime.
There are lots of topics.
There certainly are. There are lots of things I could ask you about.
Yep.
But I wanted to ask you about geocaching today just because not many people are aware of it.
Not people are. Yeah, well, now there's a whole new set of semi-muggles.
Semi-muggles.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Exactly. Muggles, what do we call them? We used to call them, Cheryl called them Muggles no more.
Muggles no more.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
You too.
Please stay tuned for the credits.
Thanks for listening to the Art and Oddities podcast with A.M. Hall. That's our show for today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go through the grueling task of leaving us a review on whatever platform you're using to listen. The URL to my iTunes page is tiny.cc/amhall, or just Google Art and Oddities Podcast for the player of your choice. The production of this podcast has been provided by Reverend Panic Evlan Bedlam, and without her it would not exist. Please consider supporting us by becoming a patron at patreon.com/panicbedlam. That's PANIKBEDLAM. Or you can buy me a coffee on my Ko-Fi. Just search for me on ko-fi.com. Evie has also done me the honor of designing some t-shirts for the podcast. Just search for Panic Bedlam on redbubble.com. Links to the Redbubble page and to pages where you can purchase Evie's books and tarot cards will be available in the show notes. Our theme music, Doxal Dance in Space-Time, or Belial and His Seven Wives, was composed and performed by Kion Huru Orion, or as I call him, Michael. Thanks, Michael. If you would like to contact the show with comments or suggestions, you can email us at artodditiespodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Facebook. Join our group at facebook.com/groups/oddartpodcast, all one word, or on Twitter at twitter.com/artodditiespod. That about wraps it up. Remember, the highest form of magic is doing, and expressing yourself is art. This is A.M. Hall, signing off.